Did you know? Vanguard predates Bushiroad by a decade. Originally printed in 1997, Vanguard was a little-known card game printed by Wizards of the Coast in a product called the Vanguard gift set. Vanguard would be printed for a total of 4 sets and 32 cards before being abandoned in 1999. Jokes aside, Vanguard was a supplementary product for Magic the Gathering developed by Wizards R&D and event departments intended for casual play in 1997. This was 14 years before Wizards of the Coast would canonize Elder Dragon Highlander as Magic's casual format commander. EDH itself is said to have been inspired by an article in Duelist magazine called Elder Legend Dragon Wars by Jesus Lopez in July 1996, as EDH was supposedly inspired by a magazine article, and it bears more than a passing resemblance to Elder Legend Dragon Wars. They both have a theming based around Legend's tricolour dragons, a legendary creature removed from the deck with importance cast upon it and decks dictated by the colour identity of that creature. Vanguard seems to be running on a similar train of thought, a card external to the deck that had influence over how you played. The Vanguard is an oversized Magic card designated a character that starts in play in what is now called the command zone. It cannot be targeted and cannot leave play. The character card has an effect that is always applied to the game state and 2 values, a modifier to the player's hand size, both starting and max, and a modifier to the player's starting life. The character cards from the first 3 sets depict characters from the Weatherlight Saga, and the final set depicts characters from the Urza Saga. Vanguard would later return in MTGO, where the character card was rebranded an Avatar and expanded beyond the physical 32, though they would lose their hand and life modifiers. I'm not sure what the flavour of Vanguard is supposed to be. It wasn't made clear in the Vanguard gift set, but I presume because of how it acts and the terminology it would later adapt, you play as the Vanguard. While I had originally thought that Vanguard may have also been influenced by Elder Legend Dragon Wars, it was released a year after the Jesus Lopez article and runs on a similar train of thought, a card external to the deck that had influence over how you played. But this doesn't seem to be the case. After I had finished this script, I was reading some blog posts about Magic. I came across a blog named Gunnarson's Bag and his 9-part series, The 7 Unforgivable Sins of Wizards of the Coast. He refers to 2 articles called Death to the Minotaur by John Tynes, a staff member of Wizards of the Coast in 1994 to 1995. I recommend reading these articles. I think there is a lot to take away from them, and what you take away may depend on your opinions of Wizards of the Coast. In the second article, John talks about how Wizards became very focused on the concept of branding in early 1995, 2 years before the Vanguard gift set. Up until then, Magic didn't have a character or something that would be recognisable. It had a theme, and that theme wasn't even consistent. Wizards management believed that they needed a recognisable band of characters for Magic to grow past the point it had already had. Years before Pikachu and Black Magician, they knew what they needed. The Weatherlight Saga and Vanguard, both in 1997, are this focus on branding brought to fruition. They both sell you on characters to bond with, and with that, the focus of Magic went from the player to the characters Wizards had concocted. What better way is there to bond than to play as that character? It worked for many games made in the wake of Magic after the turn of the millennium. I think the death of Vanguard is fairly easy to understand when you look at the functionality and compare it to EDH, even if it took Wizards another 12 years to capitalise on that with Commander. Not only was the Vanguard competing with EDH, EDH did some very important things better. Vanguard was never meant to be taken seriously, but just because something is casual, that doesn't mean people want an unfair experience. All the talk about Vanguard I can find has that while it was fun, it was unfair. Some characters were just straight up better than others. it's hard to compete with them, and the balancing factor, the value modifications for the hand and life, didn't achieve that goal. Hand is of much more importance than life, so a Vanguard like Liner, which gives you a 9-card hand and gives all your creatures shadow at the cost of 4 less starting life, is pretty much all benefits. The life reduction is irrelevant. A common sentiment is that the only life point that matters is your last, and that is true of many games, including Magic. Even cards like Broodmother Sliver Queen, which gives you +8 life and the ability to make Sliver tokens, is all gravy. Any of these cards that reduce your hand are significantly inferior. Less tools to play with, less ability to do things. This is true for every card game. The disadvantage is too great, and the effects aren't good enough to warrant it. There is also something else to consider. These can be built around in a much more open environment than Commander. They have no deck building rules. You can make characters as toxic as possible, some worse than others. I've heard of people drafting the Vanguard just to mitigate the effects of the characters while still experiencing the Vanguard format, playing it like Plane Chase. Compare this to EDH, where the card's colour identity is used as a balancing factor. It restricts what cards you have access to. It's far more flavoursome. The Commander dictates what type of wizard you are. The Commander doesn't meddle with your life or hand, nor does it have an effect on the board until it's summoned, with the exception of the 4 creatures with Eminence, an effect that seems to be greatly disliked. While I have no experience with Commander, from my understanding, the format has a greater emphasis on themes, flavour, and creativity, versus Vanguard, which just asks the player to break the character card as much as humanly possible. I think there is still space for Vanguard, just not in the way it was implemented. People are fond of the characters from Magic, old and new. Some people don't want to play with them, they want to play as them. Vanguard facilitates that. I think if we were moving towards reintroducing Vanguard, I believe taking influences from EDH in the colour identity aspect would be a positive. Give decks some balancing factors. In terms of actual effects, closer to the War of the Spark Planeswalker passives. I believe the individual life point values should be retained for flavour, but I don't think keeping the hand value is wise. I think they could probably do it better now. Wizards R&D would have a much better understanding of what constitutes as strong and weak, but I think it's still far too dangerous. It could very easily and very quickly lead to problematic cards. The interesting thing is that Mystery Booster shows us that Wizards was considering a return to the Vanguard. One of their test cards was Ral's Vanguard, a Vanguard card with some significant differences from the original Vanguards. Ral's Vanguard had a deck building rule akin to the recent companions. I'm not sure why it's Ral's Vanguard, not just Ral Zarek, who it depicts, but I guess it's just short for Ral's Vanguard card. While this card does retain the modifications to both life and hand size, Ral's Vanguard is actually close to what I was suggesting. It allows one to play as one of the current crop of Magic characters, and has some deck building rule to keep it in check. The deck building rule of Ral's Vanguard is also flavoursome. I'm really curious as to why this was knocked back, and Companion was allowed through. Vanguard, despite being its own format, seems a lot more positive than Companion, in that it gives people another way to play Magic, rather than destroying all formats necessitating its own errata. Vanguard seems to have had influences on later TCGs, even if indirectly. There is an argument for a few of the fighting games taking on the individual stats for characters, Universal Fighting System in particular. However, I think World of Warcraft is a lot more direct because the game has obvious influences from Magic. The game uses an avatar card called a hero, and it has an individual life value, though the hero is a lot better balanced and has influence over deck building. It's much closer to what I think the Vanguard should ideally be, a hybrid of the Vanguard and the Commander. This in turn means that Force of Will's ruler, something with a lot in common with Vanguard in how it is executed, can trace its roots back to the Vanguard. The ruler shares the open deck building space. Vanguard was arguably a failed experiment by Wizards of the Coast. It couldn't surpass what the fandom itself had done, something that continues to stand the test of time and Wizards themselves have capitalised upon. But it's an interesting relic of the past, one I think is worth remembering and Wizards should have revisited. It gives Magic another way to be played and a new way to attract players. I think it's worth remembering that games attract people in different ways, and what's established might not appeal to certain demographics. If you can lean into other demographics without hurting the core of the game as easily as Magic can, I'm of the opinion that is worth pursuing. This has been Some Gamer Dude, and thanks for watching.